She was just a quiet girl sitting in seat 16A, staring out the window as the clouds drifted by, her forehead lightly resting against the cool glass while the soft hum of the engines created a gentle rhythm that felt almost like a lullaby. The flight was calm, ordinary, and no one expected anything unusual to happen in the peaceful blue sky, least of all her, as she watched endless layers of white float beneath the wings like a frozen ocean. She had always loved this part of flying, the strange stillness of being suspended between earth and sky, where time felt slower and the world below seemed far away and unimportant. Her fingers curled loosely around the edge of her sweater as she breathed in the recycled cabin air mixed with faint traces of coffee and perfume, a familiar scent that reminded her of countless other journeys that had passed without incident or memory. She wasn't traveling for adventure or excitement. This was not a grand escape or a life-changing trip. It was simple, almost forgettable, just another flight added to the quiet collection of moments that made up her ordinary life. In her lap rested a worn paperback book she hadn't opened since takeoff, its pages untouched as her mind wandered somewhere between daydreams and distant memories. Her thoughts floated lazily from childhood afternoons to the sound of rain tapping against her bedroom window, to the soft echo of laughter she barely remembered from people who once mattered more than they did now. There was comfort in the monotony, in the predictability of it all, and she found herself strangely at peace in that small pocket of silence nobody else seemed to notice. Around her, the cabin moved in a slow choreography of routine. A flight attendant pushed a cart down the aisle, offering drinks with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. A man across the aisle adjusted his seatbelt and cleared his throat, his attention glued to the small screen in front of him. Somewhere behind, a child whispered questions to a tired parent, their voice hushed as if to respect the stillness of the moment. Everything felt wrapped in a gentle calm, the kind that made you forget where you were going and question whether you truly needed to arrive anywhere at all. She pressed her gaze further into the horizon, watching sunlight dissolve into the soft cotton of the clouds. The sky held a pale shade of blue, so vast and endless that it almost felt unreal, like an abstract painting stretched across infinity. There was something reassuring about it, something quietly powerful, as though the heavens themselves were holding the plane in a careful embrace. She felt small in the best possible way, insignificant yet safe, held in a space where nothing could reach her and nothing was demanded of her. Her phone rested silently on the tray table, screen dark, missed notifications irrelevant. For once, there was no pressure to respond, to explain, to be anything other than what she was in this moment. Just a girl in seat 16A, breathing in and out, watching the world drift by at a speed too great to comprehend. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle vibration of the aircraft settle into her bones, a steady reminder that life was still moving forward even when she felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. When she opened them again, the same serene view greeted her, unbroken and smooth. The clouds rolled and folded into one another like living sculptures, endlessly reshaping and reforming. She imagined what it would feel like to walk on them, to sink into their softness and disappear into the quiet white. A faint smile curved her lips at the absurdity of the thought, but she didn't wipe it away. It felt good to imagine impossible things, to let curiosity drift without boundaries for just a little while. A distant memory surfaced, one from her childhood when she would lie on the grass and trace imaginary shapes in the sky, pretending the passing clouds were ships, castles, or wings of giant birds. Back then, the world had felt full of mystery and promise. Somewhere along the way, responsibilities had chipped away at that sense of wonder, leaving behind routines and expectations that shaped her into someone predictable and safe. Yet in this quiet moment above the earth, a small fragment of that forgotten magic returned, soft and fragile but undeniably present. She adjusted her posture slightly, tucking her legs in for comfort, and allowed herself to simply observe. The wing of the aircraft stood firm and steady, slicing through the air with ease, its metal surface catching flashes of sunlight like scattered diamonds. Everything about this journey spoke of normalcy, of an uneventful passage from one place to another, and she embraced that certainty without hesitation. There was safety in knowing nothing would change, that nothing extraordinary would disrupt the gentle rhythm of this flight. Time moved differently here, measured not by seconds or minutes but by the slow shifting of light and the gradual drift of cloud formations. Her breathing matched the steady tempo of the engines, and her heartbeat echoed that quiet consistency. For a brief while, she forgot about unfinished tasks, unresolved conversations, and the quiet ache of unanswered questions waiting for her back on the ground. Up here, they couldn't touch her. Up here, everything felt distant and strangely unimportant. She leaned back, letting her head rest fully against the seat, her eyes still wandering over the endless blue. The world felt suspended, as though this moment might stretch forever, an infinite pause between chapters of her life. There was beauty in that pause, in the silent agreement between machine and sky, between motion and stillness. It was a feeling she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, yet it settled over her now like a warm blanket, comforting and light. If anyone had told her that this ordinary moment would soon transform into something unforgettable, she would have laughed quietly and turned her eyes back to the clouds. She had no reason to expect surprises, no hint of the extraordinary lurking just beyond her peaceful gaze. To her, this was simply another quiet passage through the heavens, another page in a life written softly, without spectacle or drama. And so she continued to stare out the window, lost in the subtle poetry of the sky, unaware that the calm, ordinary flight she sat upon was about to become a moment etched permanently into memory, a story born not of chaos but of wonder, beginning here in the stillness, high above the sleeping world below. Suddenly, a sleek F-35 fighter jet appeared beside the plane, flying close but steady, as if it had emerged from the very fabric of the sky itself. What began as a distant glimmer on the horizon quickly solidified into a sharply defined silhouette, its angular form cutting cleanly through the pale expanse of blue. For a heartbeat, there was confusion, a collective pause as eyes tried to interpret what they were seeing, and then reality struck with undeniable clarity. It was real. It was there. And it was moving with them, matching their speed with an unnerving yet mesmerizing precision. A ripple of astonishment surged through the cabin like an invisible wave. Gasps burst forth, some sharp and startled, others filled with pure wonder, as if the passengers had stumbled upon a scene not meant for ordinary eyes. Heads turned in unison, shoulders twisted awkwardly, and bodies leaned instinctively toward the windows, every person desperate to claim a clearer view. Fingers pointed, whispers erupted, and the usual low murmur of conversation dissolved into a symphony of disbelief and excitement. The ordinary rhythm of the flight shattered, replaced by a tense, electrified awareness that something extraordinary was unfolding right beside them. Faces pressed to the glass, breath fogging the surface as warm air met cold window panes. Eyes widened, pupils reflecting the dark, powerful shape of the fighter jet gliding effortlessly through the clouds. Some passengers laughed nervously, the sound thin and uncertain, a fragile attempt to mask the shock coursing through their veins. Others fell completely silent, their expressions frozen in awe, as though speaking might somehow break the spell of the moment. Even those who rarely displayed emotion now stared with childlike fascination, as if witnessing a living dream suspended in the open sky. The fighter maintained its position with a discipline that spoke of expert control, its presence commanding attention without a single aggressive movement. Sunlight grazed its metallic surface, creating fleeting streaks of brilliance that danced along its edges and vanished as quickly as they appeared. The aircraft looked both beautiful and intimidating, a seamless fusion of raw power and sophisticated design, floating beside the passenger plane like a silent sentinel accompanying them through an invisible corridor of air. Inside the cabin, the shift in atmosphere was unmistakable. People who moments before were lost in screens, books, or quiet naps now leaned forward urgently, their mundane concerns stripped away by the sheer surrealness of what they were witnessing. A mother steadied her child, whose excited voice trembled with questions that tumbled out too quickly for answers. A man in a suit lowered his laptop, forgotten, as his gaze locked onto the scene outside with pure, undiluted fascination. Even the flight crew paused in their practiced routines, their professionalism giving way to quiet astonishment as they too glanced toward the unfolding spectacle. The jet seemed impossibly close, close enough for every intricate detail to be seen. The precise lines of its wings, the smooth curvature of its body, the faint shimmer of its canopy revealing a silhouette within, hinting at the human presence controlling this extraordinary machine. It moved not with aggression but with a controlled grace, as if acknowledging the presence of the passenger plane and choosing to share the sky rather than dominate it. That subtle restraint only deepened the intensity of the moment, transforming fear into fascination, shock into silent admiration. Whispers filled the air, overlapping fragments of speculation and amazement. Was this part of a drill? A protective escort? A rare display of precision flying? No one had an answer, and that uncertainty only made the experience more powerful. It felt like witnessing a secret of the sky, a hidden choreography that usually unfolded far from civilian eyes, now revealing itself in full view for reasons unknown. The mystery elevated the moment, wrapping it in a sense of rarity that no one could deny. The plane continued forward, but time seemed to hesitate, stretching the seconds into something almost weightless. The sky around them glowed softly, a seamless blend of pale blue and drifting white, providing a serene contrast to the commanding presence of the fighter jet. The juxtaposition was stunning, tranquility meeting power, routine colliding with the extraordinary in a silent visual performance that demanded attention and respect. Passengers shifted constantly, searching for the perfect angle, the best glimpse, the most unforgettable view. Some pressed record on their phones, hands trembling slightly as they tried to capture proof of what words alone might never fully convey. Others chose simply to watch, understanding instinctively that no screen could truly hold the magnitude of what their eyes beheld. Their reflections mingled with the outline of the jet in the glass, two worlds overlapping, human vulnerability meeting technological might. A sense of collective unity settled over the cabin, strangers bonded by the shared experience of witnessing something almost unreal. The usual barriers of discomfort and distance dissolved, replaced by murmured exchanges and astonished glances between people who had never spoken before. In this suspended moment, everyone was connected by the same mixture of thrill and disbelief, the same awareness that this was no ordinary flight, no forgettable stretch of sky. Outside, the F-35 adjusted subtly, its motion so smooth it felt almost choreographed. It neither rushed ahead nor fell behind, maintaining its parallel glide as though acknowledging the presence of those watching from within. The clouds rolled softly beneath both aircraft, and the horizon stretched endlessly, a vast canvas upon which this silent encounter unfolded. It felt less like an interruption and more like an unexpected performance, a fleeting yet profound spectacle written across the open air. The longer it remained, the deeper its impact grew. What began as shock slowly transformed into reverence, a quiet appreciation for the marvel of human ingenuity and the boundless mystery of the skies. The jet's unwavering presence seemed to carry a message beyond words, a reminder of how small yet interconnected every life was in the grand design of the world above and below. The cabin hummed softly with restrained energy, half breathless, half enchanted. No one wanted the moment to end, yet everyone knew it would pass, just like the clouds beneath them, just like every fleeting miracle that brushed against ordinary life and vanished into memory. And still, they watched, transfixed, as the sleek F-35 continued its steady glide, a powerful companion in the endless blue, etching itself into their minds as an unforgettable vision of shock, excitement, and quiet, indescribable wonder. With help from air traffic control, she guided the damaged aircraft through the clouds, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. The radio crackled constantly in her headset, a lifeline connecting her to unseen professionals miles away who were now placing their trust in a young woman they had never met. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky looked deceptively calm, layers of white and gray clouds stretching endlessly, hiding both danger and hope within them. Inside, warning lights blinked in angry reds and ambers, alarms chimed and buzzed in relentless rhythms, and the aircraft groaned like a wounded giant struggling to stay alive. Every second felt like the last, but her hands never shook. She had slid into the captain's seat almost without thinking, muscle memory taking over as if this moment had been waiting for her all along. The yoke felt heavier than she remembered, resisting her movements as damaged control surfaces responded sluggishly. She adjusted her grip, careful not to overcorrect, reminding herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. That simple rhythm grounded her while thousands of lives balanced on her decisions. The co-pilot lay slumped beside her, oxygen mask loosely hanging, and behind her the cabin buzzed with fear, prayers, and whispered goodbyes. She blocked it out. Right now, there was only the aircraft, the instruments, and the calm voices guiding her from the ground. Air traffic control spoke clearly, deliberately, as if aware that panic could travel through the radio waves. They asked for confirmation of altitude, airspeed, and heading, and she responded smoothly, scanning the panels with trained eyes. One engine was losing power, its gauges fluctuating unpredictably, while the other strained to compensate. Fuel imbalance threatened to worsen the situation, so she followed instructions to cross-feed carefully, watching the needles inch toward stability. Clouds thickened around the aircraft, turbulence rocking it side to side, but she countered gently, refusing to fight the plane. She worked with it, listening to its vibrations, feeling its intentions through the controls. Her mind drifted briefly to seat 16A, to the version of herself who had buckled in hours earlier expecting nothing more dramatic than a routine flight. That girl had worried about spilled coffee and legroom, unaware that fate was quietly rearranging her future. Now, surrounded by glowing screens and emergency checklists, she felt the weight of responsibility settle deep in her chest. Fear tried to creep in, whispering about failure and consequences, but she pushed it aside. Fear had no place here. Focus did. The clouds grew darker, thicker, swallowing the wings until they disappeared from view. The artificial horizon became her truth, a blue and brown line she trusted more than her own senses. Air traffic control warned her of rough air ahead and suggested a slight change in heading to avoid the worst of it. She complied, rolling the aircraft slowly, mindful of the damaged systems. Each movement was calculated, precise, almost graceful. The plane responded reluctantly but obediently, as if recognizing her calm and choosing to survive. Sweat formed along her hairline, but her hands remained steady, fingers adjusting throttles and switches with deliberate care. She repeated instructions out loud, a habit drilled into her long ago, ensuring nothing was missed. Altitude hold was unreliable, so she managed pitch manually, eyes flicking between the altimeter and vertical speed indicator. The numbers fluctuated, dipped, then steadied as she found the sweet spot. The controller's voice carried a hint of relief when she reported stable flight, and she felt a small surge of confidence. They believed in her. She had to believe in herself. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously, minutes feeling like hours while entire sequences of actions blurred together. She monitored cabin pressure, aware that any failure there would create a new nightmare. Oxygen levels held steady, mercifully, and she relayed the update. In the cabin, flight attendants did their best to maintain order, speaking softly to passengers, but the tension was unmistakable. Somewhere behind her, a child cried, and the sound cut through her focus for just a heartbeat. She swallowed, tightened her grip, and kept flying. Air traffic control began coordinating an emergency landing, directing other aircraft out of the way, clearing a long runway, and alerting emergency services. She listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. Wind direction, runway length, approach path. The damaged aircraft would need a shallow, controlled descent, no sudden movements. They warned her that visibility near the airport was limited, clouds hanging low and thick. She acknowledged, already preparing herself for an instrument approach that would demand absolute concentration. The aircraft shuddered suddenly as turbulence intensified, a violent jolt that sent loose items rattling across the cockpit. Alarms flared briefly, then quieted. Her heart jumped, but her hands did not. She adjusted trim, compensated with rudder, and spoke calmly into the radio, reporting the disturbance. The controller reassured her, offering updated weather data and encouraging her steady handling. That reassurance mattered more than she realized. She was not alone up here. An entire team was working with her, trusting her. As they descended, the clouds grew denser, a swirling gray maze that erased all sense of direction. She relied completely on the instruments now, tuning out the instinctual urge to look outside. The descent rate was critical. Too fast and they risked structural damage, too slow and they might not make it. She managed thrust carefully, balancing the remaining engine's power with drag from partially extended flaps. Each adjustment was followed by a pause, a check, a confirmation. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, as if time itself had slowed to match her focus. Memories surfaced unbidden, fragments of past training, long hours in simulators practicing worst-case scenarios that had once felt exaggerated. Instructors' voices echoed in her mind, reminding her to trust procedures, to fly the aircraft first, to never let panic make decisions. She realized then how much those moments had shaped her, preparing her for this impossible situation. What once felt like routine drills now guided her hands and thoughts with quiet authority. Air traffic control counted down distances, guiding her along the invisible path toward the runway. 10 miles out. 8. 6. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the engines, steady and controlled. The aircraft protested occasionally, vibrating through the controls, but she responded gently, coaxing it onward. She imagined the runway lights piercing the clouds, a promise of solid ground waiting below. She held onto that image, letting it anchor her resolve. The final approach was the most demanding, the margin for error razor thin. Visibility dropped further, clouds swirling past the windshield in thick sheets. She adjusted her descent, aligning with the localizer, keeping the glideslope centered. The controller's voice softened, offering quiet encouragement as she reported each checkpoint. Her focus narrowed to a tunnel, the outside world fading until there was only the approach indicators and the feel of the aircraft beneath her. At moments, doubt threatened to rise, fueled by fatigue and the relentless stress of sustained concentration. But each time it appeared, she acknowledged it and let it pass, refusing to give it control. She reminded herself that fear could exist without dictating her actions. Her hands, steady and precise, proved the truth with every correction. As the aircraft descended further, turbulence eased slightly, offering a small mercy. She took advantage of the smoother air to refine her alignment, nudging the nose gently, maintaining speed within the narrow acceptable range. Air traffic control confirmed that emergency crews were standing by, the runway fully clear. She responded with a calm acknowledgement, her voice betraying none of the storm of emotion beneath. The clouds began to thin, subtle changes in light hinting that the ground was near. Her heart quickened, but her posture remained relaxed, shoulders loose, grip firm but not tense. She scanned instruments continuously, cross-checking altitude and airspeed, ready to react instantly. This was the moment everything led to, the culmination of countless decisions made under pressure. Even now, with the runway just beyond the veil of clouds, she maintained discipline. No rushing, no shortcuts. She followed the approach precisely, trusting the process that had brought her this far. The aircraft responded, descending smoothly, almost gratefully, as if acknowledging her care. In those final moments, time seemed to hold its breath alongside her. Every second still felt like the last, but her hands never shook. They guided the aircraft steadily through the final layers of cloud, carrying with them not just a damaged plane, but the fragile hopes of everyone on board. And as the ground drew closer, unseen but inevitable, her calm became the most powerful force in the sky, stronger than fear, stronger than chaos, and strong enough to bring them all home. As the plane stabilized, the violent shuddering that had gripped the cabin for what felt like an eternity slowly faded into a manageable hum. The nose leveled out, the wings steadied, and for the first time since the crisis began, the aircraft felt like it wanted to live. Inside the cockpit, Warning lights still glowed and instruments demanded constant attention, but the balance had shifted. The plane was no longer falling out of the sky, it was flying again. She exhaled deeply, not in relief, but in recognition that the most delicate phase was unfolding. Survival was no longer just a hope. It was becoming a reality. Beyond the cockpit windows, the clouds thinned, revealing patches of blue sky that looked impossibly peaceful compared to the terror that had filled the cabin moments earlier. Sunlight spilled across the glass, illuminating the wings that had been invisible for so long. As the aircraft emerged from the gray, something unexpected appeared off the left side, a sharp, sleek silhouette slicing through the air with effortless grace. At first, she thought her exhausted mind was playing tricks on her. Then it came closer, unmistakable in shape and presence. An F-35 fighter jet had pulled alongside the passenger plane. The sight was surreal. The fighter's angular lines and dark gray skin contrasted sharply with the scarred commercial aircraft it escorted. It moved with precision and confidence, matching speed and altitude perfectly, as if the two machines were connected by an invisible thread. She felt a quiet awe rise within her, tempered by focus. Military escorts were not unusual in emergencies, but seeing one this close, this personal, was something else entirely. It was as if the sky itself had sent a guardian. Passengers began to notice. Faces pressed against windows, gasps rippled through the cabin, and whispers turned into emotional murmurs. Fear gave way to astonishment, then to hope. Children stopped crying. Adults who had clutched armrests in silent terror now stared in disbelief. The presence of the fighter jet felt like a promise. You are not alone. You are protected. You are seen. Inside the cockpit, air traffic control confirmed the escort, their voices carrying a rare warmth. The fighter pilot had been briefed on the situation and was there to ensure a safe passage through the remaining airspace. She acknowledged calmly, eyes flicking between the instruments and the incredible sight outside. The F-35 held its position with absolute steadiness, a testament to the pilot's skill. For a fleeting moment, two worlds overlapped, civilian desperation and military precision sharing the same slice of sky. The fighter jet edged slightly closer, its canopy glinting in the sunlight. She could almost imagine the pilot inside, alert and focused, scanning her aircraft, assessing its condition. Though separated by glass and metal, she felt a strange connection, an unspoken understanding between aviators. One had been trained for combat at the edge of human capability, the other had risen unexpectedly from anonymity to meet fate head-on. Both shared the same air, the same responsibility to protect life. Then, in a gesture that would be remembered long after the engines shut down, the F-35 dipped its wings. It was subtle, controlled, unmistakable. A salute in the sky. For a heartbeat, time seemed to pause. The movement was not part of any procedure or requirement. It was human. It was acknowledgement. It said what words could not: respect, recognition, gratitude. She felt a lump rise in her throat, but her hands remained steady on the controls. The gesture washed over her like a wave, carrying with it the realization that what she had done mattered far beyond this cockpit. In the cabin, the reaction was instant and overwhelming. Tears flowed freely as passengers understood the meaning of the salute. Some clasped their hands together in prayer, others hugged strangers, and many simply cried, overwhelmed by the emotional release. The fighter jet's wings had spoken for everyone. The terror was over. A miracle had taken place, and they had lived through it together. News of the moment spread rapidly, even before the plane touched down. Cameras captured the escort from the ground, air traffic communications were logged, and within minutes, the story was racing across networks and social media. A commercial flight in distress. A young woman from seat 16A guiding it to safety. A military jet saluting her courage midair. The narrative wrote itself, but no headline could fully capture the gravity of what had happened in that sky. Back in the cockpit, she stayed focused. Admiration could wait. The aircraft still needed to land, and the margin for error remained slim. She adjusted her course as instructed, the runway now a confirmed destination rather than a distant hope. The F-35 maintained its position, a silent sentinel off her wing. She felt strength in its presence, as if its confidence flowed into her through the air itself. As the plane descended, the city came into view, buildings glinting under the sun, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded above them. Emergency vehicles lined the runway like a guard of honor, their flashing lights ready for the worst but hoping for the best. She monitored her speed, her altitude, her alignment, everything coming together in a delicate balance. The aircraft responded, tired but cooperative, as if sharing her determination to reach the ground safely. In those final moments, her thoughts drifted briefly to who she had been before this flight. An ordinary passenger. A face lost in a crowd. A seat number no one would ever remember. Now, that number had become a symbol, a reminder that heroism does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly, buckled in, waiting for a moment that may never come, until suddenly it does. The fighter jet stayed with her until the very edge of controlled airspace. Before peeling away, it dipped its wings once more, a final, silent goodbye. She watched it climb and turn, disappearing into the sky as effortlessly as it had arrived. The absence felt profound, but the confidence it left behind remained. The landing itself was hard but controlled, tires screeching against the runway as the aircraft slowed, every second echoing with tension. When the plane finally came to a stop, the cabin erupted. Applause thundered, mixed with sobs and laughter, the sound of human beings realizing they were alive. She sat quietly for a moment, hands resting on the controls, letting the noise wash over her. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Emergency crews rushed forward, doors opened, and fresh air filled the cabin. Passengers looked toward the cockpit with reverence, many whispering words of thanks as they passed. Some reached out, touching her arm, her shoulder, grounding themselves in the presence of the person who had carried them through the impossible. She responded with gentle nods, overwhelmed but composed, her humility as striking as her courage. When she finally stepped out of the aircraft, cameras flashed, voices called out, and the world leaned in, hungry for details. But the most powerful moment had already happened, high above the ground, in a quiet exchange between two aircraft. One wounded and struggling, one strong and watchful, and between them, a gesture of respect that transcended rank, profession, and expectation. In that moment, the world realized the truth. Heroism does not always wear a uniform or sit in the cockpit from the beginning. Sometimes it rises from seat 16A, guided by courage, steadiness, and an unbreakable will to protect others. The salute of the F-35 was not just for her. It was a reminder to everyone watching that extraordinary strength can come from the most ordinary places, and that when it does, even the sky pauses to honor it.